Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm Terry, your host. It is Sunday, March 3rd. So I went a few days without doing a video. I had a bunch of stuff that I wanted to talk about, but I don't know. I'll just say my energy was depleted. My trainee Logan took his CDL exam yesterday here in Springfield, Missouri, where I still am, and he passed it, trifected as they say here at Prime. So he's on his way back to his home in South Carolina. He's gonna get his license, and I'm gonna pick him up probably a week from tomorrow. I do have a load, but it's a Tyson load, and I called and they're like, oh yeah, they don't work on weekends. So even though the window opened up on Friday, the load's not ready, and they have until like 1800 tomorrow or 1700 tomorrow to get it ready. But that load is going to Maine. So a little change of scenery, and I got it delivered up there on Thursday morning, so we'll get that done. What else is going on? So that's about it for, like trucking operations of Tim Travels. So on this day in history, and by the way, I just want to say February went by way faster than I had anticipated, and I didn't get to talk about all the black history that I had researched, but that's okay, because I'm kind of, black history, women's history, Asian Pacific Islander history, it's all history to me. It all matters. And so all that research hasn't gone to waste. I'll definitely be talking about that stuff. And it's kind of funny. There's a guy named Jamie, and I can't remember his last name, but he does the British History podcast, which I highly recommend. I think he's probably at over 900 episodes. I mean, he is just a really bright guy. He was a lawyer, and then he just became a full-time podcaster, and he does a great job. So if you ever get a chance to just start listening to the British History podcast, I bet you'll get addicted to it. But he makes a point in a very early episode of his podcast. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he was basically like, yeah, so we're going to talk about these other people in history. What are they? Oh yeah, they're called women. And a lot of the history that we read and learn in school is all about big shots, kings and princes and emperors and presidents. And 9 times out of 10, those people that we're learning about, those events that were shaped by them, it's like, Western European men. Sometimes we learn about some dynasty in China, or we learn about something else, but the pharaohs. But by and large, what our history is the history of famous white guys. And that's partially, it's not because, this is not a knock on famous white guys as much as it's a knock on historians. To the victor go the spoils, but also the victors write the history, and oftentimes. And the little guy, the person just toiling away, the woman, the slave, the serf, whoever it was, the person that was on the front lines, so to speak, their stories get lost to history. And not in a good, they're just... So that's why I always say talk to your relatives and stuff. Like if your great-grandfather was just a dog face in World War II, it would be really cool to see what he thinks. What did he think about, Patton or Eisenhower or Roosevelt or whoever? What did he think? What was the war like from his perspective? Or what was the Depression like from his perspective? So anyway, I just share that with you because that's kind of my historical like philosophy. I think everybody matters, not just the rich and famous. So on this date in history, 1847, Alexander Graham Bell was born. He's famous for a few things, mostly the telephone and the phonograph. But I was talking with somebody the other day, and I was telling them about how I learned about Alexander Graham Bell from going to the James A. Garfield Historic Site in Ohio. And that was because Bell was trying to expedite inventing an X-ray machine to try to find the bullet that was lodged in Garfield's body after he was shot and eventually died in 1881. What else happened on this day? Jean Harlow was born. She was like the original blonde bombshell. She was born in 1911. On this day in 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner was first recognized by Congress as the national anthem. And a lot of people have strong opinions about that song when it's played, and there are some protocols, but you know, it's just a song, right? We could have a better national anthem. You know, I'm sure somebody could write a better one, because you know, Francis Scott Key wrote it as a poem, or I guess you would say a poem. It's a tough song to sing for people, and you know, the interesting thing about it is it's just a song. It's just this representation of something that happened in the War of 1812, and which kind of begs the question: if that was written during the War of 1812, which it was, and it was such a great song, why did it take longer for it to become a song or become the national anthem than it's been the national anthem? Like, it hasn't even been the national anthem 100 years, but it took like almost 120 years for it to even become the national anthem. And so I don't know that we won't change the national anthem to something else at some point. I mean, come on, we've only had this song as the national anthem for what, 94 years or something? So 93 years. So I don't get particularly worked up. In fact, I don't get worked up at all when somebody doesn't stand for the national anthem, or they don't stop for the national anthem. The only time that bothered me was when I was in the military, because the military has rules about it. But if you're a civilian and you're at, you know, some stupid sporting event where they just decide they got to play this for no apparent reason, because I mean, we don't play it at the beginning of our work day. We just at some point, and my issue with it is there's a lot of fake patriotism. You know, and I've talked about this before, how the NFL and the NHL were getting paid to do these patriotic displays. And so I just don't recognize their patriotic displays as being important to me. I paid to go see some guys skate real fast and shoot a piece of rubber really hard at each other, and occasionally, you know, and to slam into each other. Same thing in football. If I'm there, I'm paying to watch guys, giant men, crashing into each other, and you know, throwing this pigskin down the field. I didn't pay to be, you know, coerced by some patriotic expression. And so, you know, if somebody wants to kneel for the national anthem, I'm fine with it. If you want to stay seated, I'm fine with it. If you want to stand and stretch your legs and talk to your buddy and you know, knock back the rest of your beer during it, I'm fine with that. And, you know, and that's the thing, right? Like, people stand, but then they kind of like, they're still talking to each other, they're still swilling their beer, and, you know, and then it, like, Baltimore Orioles games, when they have the "Oh, say can you see," everybody just shouts "Oh," because, you know, they call the Orioles the O's. So, you know, and by the way, and that's in the town where the thing was written. So I just don't put a lot into it. For me, patriotism is something completely different than, you know, just checking a box. So anyway, that's my opinion. I'm sure it's not popular, but it is mine. So what else happened on this day? King Alexander II in Russia freed the serfs. And you know, I want to say that the difference, you know, I've talked about slavery a lot, but serfdom was this other kind of enslavement, but it was more like indentured servitude. But the interesting thing is, we were going down the road the other day and I think I was in the passenger seat, and I went by this ramshackle mobile home park, and it was called like something like, you know, Preston Manor, or oh no, it was called Heritage Manor. And I was like, you know, when people call things a manor, what they're doing is they're invoking the manorial system, which was serfs. And, you know, if I'm just a working class guy like I am, I really wouldn't want to live in a place called a manor when I don't live in the manor house. A manor was not much different than a plantation. The only difference was that people weren't technically slaves, and a lot of times a manor would have like a church on it so they could get religion for everybody. But it was still excuse me, it was still this exploitive system. And yeah, so speaking of like making money and being exploited and stuff, I wanted to, there have been some things that I've seen in the news and come across my feed, and I'm just like, what are people willing to do to make money? And, you know, a lot of times I hear people bad-mouthing lot lizards. And by the way, I hate that term, because they're not lizards, they're just human beings. And you know, I'm like, I don't know what the criticism is for. Is it because somebody's a sex worker? Is it because they're seen as, you know, less meritorious of being treated like any other human being because of what they do? And I got to thinking about that and what people do for money. But I've seen a number of things recently that involve the trucking industry, and I'm just like, people are really willing to do things that are illegal to make a buck. And I bring all this up because I'm very certain that most of these people didn't set out, you know, they didn't get up one morning and say, okay, I'm now going to become a criminal so I can make the money that I feel like I deserve to make. And the first instance is, there was this guy, and I don't know his name, he's down in Texas, and he and his wife both worked from home. And don't worry, I'm going to get to the trucking aspect of this in a minute. So his wife, it turns out, worked for BP, British Petroleum. She worked in the oil industry, or worked for a petroleum company. And this was when BP was getting ready to buy out Truck Stops of America, TA and Petro. And so the husband, who does not work for BP or TA or Petro or any of that mess, they decide to, he overhears his wife talking about the final preparations for the tender offer that BP, I think it was a tender offer, that BP was going to make to TA, and how this, and you know, that this was a go, this potential merger was a go. And a little backstory is that when companies decide to merge, especially companies where the stock is public, like Truck Stops of America and BP, what you're typically going to see is almost always you're going to see the value of the stock of the target company, meaning the company being bought. You're going to see that stock spike up. Just like when KNX, Knight Swift Holdings, announced they were buying USX stock went up sharply. Okay? In other words, if you held USX stock, all of a sudden you had a windfall. Well, the same as you might, and sometimes if the market loves the deal, then the company that's the acquirer or the company that's the buyer, their stock spikes up. Oftentimes their stock is flat or maybe even goes down. I got all the hand symbols for stock prices. It goes down because they're like, okay, well, this is going to cost them some money. They're going to have to change some things, get things up to speed. But in any event, it's almost always, like probably 99% of the time, is seen as a positive for the company that's the target, that's being acquired. So what this guy does is he takes the information that he overheard on his wife's conference call or call with her colleagues at BP, unbeknownst to her, and he buys a bunch of TA stock. And guess what? He makes a bunch of money. He kills it. He makes like $1.6 million in profit off of his TA stock purchase. And I also mentioned this because my good friend Lyle had some TA stock. I don't know if he got out of that position before the merger was announced or before BP took over. I don't remember. I'd have to ask him. But anyway, you know, this guy makes $1.6 million, and it's just off what he overheard from his wife, from his wife's phone call. So that's really cool, right? Except it's illegal. Except it's a felony. It's a federal crime. It's called insider trading. And the reason I bring all this up is because you and I could easily, if we don't know the law and we don't know the rules, we could easily get caught up in something like this. And let me give you an example. I work for Prime, or I'm a contractor with Prime. But Prime is a huge company, and Prime has a lot of resources. And they probably borrow a lot of money if they needed to. And there are companies out there that are publicly traded companies, trucking companies, that are smaller than Prime. So I'll just take a company like Martin Transportation out of Wisconsin. I'm pretty sure Martin is smaller than Prime. And even if they weren't smaller, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the money. So let's say that I caught wind here at Prime that Martin was going to be a target of Prime. Okay, well, you know, there might be 100 people at Prime that know that information. But if any of them that know that information before the announcement is made to the public, because see, insider trading is trading on material, and this is the legal definition of it, material non-public information. Material non-public information, right? Like if there was a rumor that Prime was buying out a publicly traded company, and I was just like, well, I'm gonna guess that Prime's gonna buy out, Heartland Express. They're publicly traded. And I heard a rumor that Prime's going to be making a big purchase. I just go out and buy Heartland Express stock. Well, if it turns out to be Heartland Express, then I wasn't trading on material non-public information. I was trading on a rumor, and I just made a guess at what company could be a target. And if I'm right, then I cash in. But if I'm wrong, then, I just own some Heartland Express stock that's not doing much. Okay, but if I hear from a reliable source, like say somebody in corporate finance at Prime, hey, we're getting ready to make a tender offer on Heartland Express. We're going to announce it next week. And I go out and buy Heartland Express. That's insider trading. Now, what happened with it, and I'm going to tell you, and you might be like, well, how did this guy get caught? Well, how this guy got caught, and I'm giving you some inside information on how the Securities and Exchange Commission works, because I worked at the SEC when I was in law school, and I knew people. I didn't work in the enforcement division. I worked in the corporation finance division, but I knew people in enforcement, and we used to get, because we were law students, we used to get like, briefings and tutorials. We'd sit down with like leadership at the commission. And one of the guys, I don't remember his name, but he was an investigator in the division of enforcement. And he was in the enforcement division, and he sat down and he was like, and I think this was both, let me tell you how we do business, but also it was a warning to us as lawyers not to get caught up in something like this. And because always insider trading, almost always is like smart people who think they're going to outsmart the system. And he told us how it is that they catch insider traders. And he said, you know what I do is I look at the Wall Street Journal and I see what's happening. And if I saw, BP made a tender offer, and I guarantee this is exactly how this guy got caught. BP makes a tender offer. They know that the stock price of TA is going to go up. And they know that lots of people would have known about that. So they just start looking at the trading records for TA. And no public company, no broker, no dealer, no market maker, nobody is not going to give the SEC information when the SEC asks for it. The SEC isn't going to even need a subpoena. If the SEC says, hey, give me all your trading activity for TA on these days, right? They're going to see that some dude in Texas all of a sudden buys like, $100,000 worth of TA stock in one trade. And he does it on margin too, right? Margin is the equivalent of credit in stock transactions. He buys a shit ton of TA stock on margin. And then, of course, he cashes in, right? They're like, why would this dude, randomly, he hasn't been buying 10,000 at a time. And then all of a sudden he was like, he already had $100,000 worth. And then he doubles his position. No, this guy just like, wham, buys like, I don't know, 500,000 shares or something stupid like that, and he makes a butt ton of money, and then he immediately liquidates the position to cover the margin call, but also take his profit. And they're just going to drill down. They're going to be like, okay, who was this dude? Because when you buy stock in public companies, that is a public record. It's not normal. It's not like people are going to look it up online, but it's not a record that's subject to secrecy either. And so they're just going to go to whoever the market maker was, whoever granted that margin, and say, hey, who is this guy? And then they're going to be like, okay, who is this guy? They find out his name. They find out where he lives. Then what are they going to do? They're going to start checking to see who his associates are. And guess what they're going to find out? This dude's wife works for BP. And then they're going to be like, hey, can we talk to you? And next thing you know, this guy's facing time in federal prison. And by the way, insider trading is not just to get a huge profit, make a windfall. It's also to avoid losses. Martha Stewart did insider trading to avoid losses. And she didn't actually go to prison for insider trading. She went to prison for lying to the FBI about insider trading. She went for obstruction of justice. But so anyway, here's this guy. He's probably going to lose his career. He's going to lose his marriage, and he's not going to get to keep the 1.6 million. Okay, but let's talk about something a little more pedestrian that I hear about: drug smuggling and human smuggling. You know, a lot of truckers, I say a lot, I don't know what percentage it is, but a lot of truckers get arrested for drug trafficking. And when I say a lot, I mean more than one, right? It should be none, but it's more than one. And, you know, there are guys that get arrested for, you know, just transporting. You know, there was a guy that was arrested. He had 3 dudes in his truck, right? In his sleeper. You know, he's going to federal prison for a long time. And some of these guys are my age. And they're going to do, they're in their 50s and 60s, and they're going to do the rest of their lives in prison because they were trying to make like $5,000. I mean, and ask yourself this, right? Now, let me say this, right? Let me say this. I do see a disparity between the dude who got $1.6 million. He's going to go to jail for like 3 years, and it's going to be a cushy prison. The dude who was just trying to make $5,000, who was transporting human beings, he's going to go to jail for a long, long time. The dude that had a couple of pounds of cocaine and he was getting paid $4,000 to move it, he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. So I think there's a disparity, but that's just how the system is. And the thing is, like, it's really easy to get tempted in this business to do something for money with unscrupulous people. Unscrupulous people go to desperate people for help. And what my message is, you know, like I saw a couple of companies up in Michigan, actually several companies up in Michigan, that have recently been hit with enormous fines, big enough fines to put them out of business. And these companies were making money by overriding emission systems on diesel trucks. And I'm sure that they knew it was illegal. In fact, I'm very certain they knew it was illegal. I'm very certain that the truckers who are paying them a few $1,000s to override stuff know it's illegal. But yet, people are willing to do, you know, risk prison time in some cases for a very tiny amount of money. You know, and so I share all this with you to just ask the question: what is it that you're willing to do? Because if you're willing to go to prison for somebody that you don't know, and you're willing to do years in the can for a few $1,000s, should you just say, I need to find a different way to make a living? Because if you're not making enough money in trucking, that you're going to smuggle humans, or you're going to smuggle drugs, or you're going to, and one of these smuggling operations, it was they hid cocaine in like I think they hid cocaine in watermelon bins, but but what they did is, this is funny to me, they put pictures of watermelons on the outside of the boxes that actually had the cocaine in it. And I was like, that, I'll give them an A for effort, you know, but it was so dumb. But, you know, it's easy to be tempted. It's easy to be tempted. Somebody comes up to you at a truck stop, and a lot of times they're not going to pick on some mega company. They're not going to pick a Prime or, you know, CR England or somebody like that. They're going to pick some one-off independent contractor with some ramshackle old Freightliner, and they're going to be like, this guy will be desperate for money, you know. And I've met people like that could have been those marks, you know. I met a guy one time that was like afraid to go across Oklahoma Panhandle because he was worried about, you know, how Oklahoma is more aggressive at enforcing commercial vehicle laws than, say, Texas or Colorado. So he was like, he asked me like what the best route was. I'm like, oh, you could go across 54 and then go to Dalhart and go north. But anyway, I share all this with you because we all come across, and by the way, just to go back to the diesel guys, if you get your truck modified like that and you see that the company that you got, you know, that you gave money to modify your exhaust system just got busted by some agency, do you really think that agency doesn't have the records of every truck they worked on? Because you paid $2,000, $5,000, whatever it is, to get your exhaust system modified, and that's a crime, right? Like, you paid to commit a crime. You didn't even get money out of it unless I guess you think you can go faster or have better fuel economy, but you paid to be involved in a crime, you know? And don't be surprised when somebody comes knocking on your door and slaps a huge civil fine on you. But I bring all this up because there are a lot of people that come into trucking and they've really had to hustle just to survive. And trucking is that one opportunity that they can probably turn the corner with. You know, go from living near the poverty line to something better. But oftentimes we're not patient and we want to do something quicker than we can. We're not willing, because even when you come into trucking and you're making more money, you have to suffer to be successful. And I've told my kids that over the years. You have to be willing to suffer to be successful. You know, a lot of people that have, you know, good jobs and make a lot of money, a lot of times they've worked themselves into those positions. They didn't come from money. They just worked really hard. They suffered to be successful. And so I encourage you to never ever get involved in anything sketchy that's gonna jeopardize your freedom, your career, your livelihood. You know, don't do it. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You know, yeah, that guy down in El Paso that just wants you to take those 3 dudes to Dallas in your sleeper, it's all cool if it works out. You know? I mean, who am I to say, right? Like, those 3 guys want to go to Dallas, you're going to Dallas, why shouldn't you make $5,000 extra? Well, the answer is, you know, if it works out, it works out. But if it doesn't, and the fact that it didn't, you know, I'm talking about it, that's how you know it didn't work out. That's a lot of time to do for only $5,000. I mean, think about it. The average trucker, even a lower paid trucker in an average month can make $5,000. 1 month. Your attorneys, unless you get a public defender. But I mean, you know, just think about it. Think about it for 1 second. You know, if you're going to go to jail, you know, you better be able to keep a lot of that money. You know, if you're going to go to prison for, you know, 3 years on a white collar crime, but you got $3 million stashed away somewhere that the government can't find, can't get to, okay, I might do 3 years in the can just to keep my $3 million. But I sure as hell don't want to do 13 years in the can for $5,000. And you shouldn't either. So don't be tempted. And by the way, if you got a question about whether something's illegal, call a lawyer or shoot me a message. But yeah, don't fall into that trap. I don't want anybody to, you know, because I think these guys that were smuggling drugs and smuggling people, they're just trying to make a buck. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this is food for thought, and you know, maybe somebody will maybe somebody's life will go in a different direction because they saw this. So anyway, I will talk to you soon, and be safe out there. Bye.